For over 2,000 years, the architectural legacy of the Giza Plateau has been evaluated almost exclusively by its vertical monuments. Modern historiography routinely measures the significance of this landscape by the elevation of its limestone apexes, the tonnage of its megaliths, and the geometric precision of its surface profiles. However, this contemporary perspective represents a profound departure from the empirical observations of classical antiquity. To the historians, geographers, and natural philosophers of the Greco-Roman world, the monumental architecture visible above the desert floor was not an isolated achievement. Instead, it was the surface manifestation of a highly integrated, multi-tiered, subterranean infrastructure. The concept of a hidden, subterranean network beneath the Memphite necropolis is embedded within the earliest surviving architectural surveys of the region. Classical authors did not treat these underground spaces as mythological constructs or allegorical topographies. Instead, they catalogued them with the clinical detachment of cartographers and engineers. They recorded dimensions, analyzed material compositions, described acoustic properties, and noted the structural integration of underground chambers with the monuments above. To systematically reconstruct this chronology, we must isolate the primary textual evidence from modern speculative interpretations. We must examine the documents precisely as they were written, evaluating the reliability of the authors through the lens of modern empirical archaeology. The foundational account of this network begins in the 5th century BCE with the Greek researcher Herodotus of Halicarnassus. His architectural critique of the Egyptian labyrinth remains the benchmark against which all subsequent classical testimonies must be measured. Herodotus was a pioneer of the methodology he termed historia, meaning inquiry or investigation. When he traveled to Egypt, he did so with the explicit objective of cataloguing the marvels of the ancient world through systematic observation. The scale of the architecture he encountered required a new vocabulary of description, as the existing Greek architectural terms were insufficient to convey the sheer volume of masonry and the complexity of the spatial layouts. Furthermore, the classical view of Egypt was one of profound antiquity and institutional stability. The Greeks recognized that the Egyptian priesthood maintained historical records that extended thousands of years into the past, far eclipsing the fragmented oral traditions of the Aegean. When a classical author recorded descriptions of underground networks, they were often translating records of an ancient state apparatus. This apparatus viewed subterranean containment as a core requirement for national preservation and religious continuity. In the second book of his histories, specifically within chapter 148, Herodotus details an architectural complex that he asserts surpassed even the monumental achievements of the Greek world. He writes, "I found it greater than words can say, for if one were to choose all the walls and display of work built by Greeks, they would be seen to be lesser both in labor and expense than this labyrinth, though the temple in Ephesus is noteworthy, and that in Samos the pyramids also were greater than words can say, and each one of them a match for many and great works of the Greeks, but the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. For generations during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Mainstream Eurocentric academia treated this passage, and indeed much of Herodotus's Egyptian narrative, with profound, professional skepticism. He was frequently assigned the pejorative title of the father of lies. Critics argued that his structural measurements were mathematically implausible, that his geographical orientations were flawed, and that he was routinely deceived by local dragomans and priestly informants who fabricated narratives for foreign tourists. It was widely asserted that a subterranean layout of the scale Herodotus described, consisting of 3,000 distinct chambers, split evenly between upper and lower levels, was a structural impossibility for the Bronze and Iron Age engineering capabilities of the Nile Valley. Auvergne. Late 20th and early 21st century archaeology has systematically overturned this skeptical consensus, providing a series of dramatic vindications for Herodotus's material accuracy. To understand why we must accept his testimony regarding the subterranean structures of Egypt, we must examine how his contested descriptions have fared under modern physical excavation. The most compelling case study in this historiographical rehabilitation is the rediscovery of the ancient maritime metropolis of Thonis Heracleion. For centuries, Herodotus was the sole historical source asserting the existence of this grand port city at the canopic mouth of the Nile, where he claimed Paris and Helen of Troy sought refuge before the Trojan War. Because no trace of the city could be found on the modern Egyptian coastline, classical scholars argued that Herodotus had invented the geography to ground his mythological allusions. In the year 2000, however, marine archaeologists located the entirely intact ruins of Thonis Heracleion, submerged beneath 9 meters of water in Abu Qir Bay. The architectural layout, the monumental temples, and the epigraphic evidence matched the topographical markers recorded by Herodotus with astonishing precision. Furthermore, in chapter 96 of his second book, Herodotus provides an extraordinarily specific technical description of Egyptian cargo vessels known as baris. He noted that these ships were constructed like brickwork, built with short planks cut into 2-cubit lengths, secured with long close-set dowels, and colcated from the inside with papyrus. For 2 millennia, naval historians dismissed this design as structurally unviable, arguing that a hull built without an internal skeletal frame would disintegrate under the hydrodynamic stress of the Mediterranean currents. This skepticism persisted until 2019, when the excavation of Ship 17 at the submerged site of Thonis Heracleion revealed a perfectly preserved hull. The vessel exhibited the exact brick-like internal ribbing, the specific 2-cubit planking, and the internal papyrus caulking documented by Herodotus 2,500 years prior. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond naval architecture or maritime trade routes. They alter the epistemological framework of classical historiography. They demonstrate that Herodotus possessed a highly sophisticated, mechanically accurate understanding of Egyptian material culture. He was not a fabulist. He was an empirical observer who recorded technical data with meticulous care. If his descriptions of maritime, engineering, and lost urban topographies have been verified by modern physical science, it is methodologically inconsistent for modern academia to dismiss his explicit, detailed descriptions of Egypt's subterranean architectural complexes. To maintain an objective academic standard, we must analyze the specific linguistic boundaries Herodotus establishes within his own text. He was remarkably candid about the limits of his empirical data, explicitly separating what he witnessed personally from what he gathered through secondary testimonies. This distinction is vital when evaluating his account of the underground chambers. He writes, "The upper chambers I myself saw and walked through, and I speak of them from my own observation. But the underground chambers I only heard of from the Egyptians. For those of the Egyptians who had charge of them would by no means show them, saying that they were the tombs of the kings who had built this labyrinth, and also of the sacred crocodiles. Thus I speak of the lower chambers from hearsay alone, but the upper ones I saw myself, and they are greater than human works." This passage demonstrates a rigorous methodological protocol. Herodotus utilizes the Greek concept of autopsia direct, eyewitness observation for the upper 1,500 rooms. He describes the intricate transitions from courts to chambers, the winding passages from room to room, and the uniform composition of the white stone walls. When he is denied access to the lower 1,500 rooms by the priestly custodians, he immediately shifts his rhetorical posture to a co-oral report. He does not pretend to have walked the subterranean corridors. Instead, he records the official state justification for their secrecy, that they served as an immutable, secure repository for the foundational elites of the state and its most sacred zoological symbols. By analyzing his vocabulary, we see that Herodotus provides us with an authentic, administrative reality. The underground chambers were intentionally restricted zones protected by religious and political sanctions. His testimony proves that during the 5th century BCE, a vast, subterranean, double-tiered complex was not only known to exist, but was actively guarded. The strictness of this segregation indicates that the subterranean levels were not merely storage facilities or passive structural voids. They were operational environments reserved for sacred administrative or royal functions. The refusal of the priests to grant access to a high-status foreign researcher underscores the profound geopolitical and religious value assigned to these repositories. For Herodotus to record this refusal so explicitly validates his integrity as a reporter. A fabricator would have simply claimed to have entered the lower chambers to complete the narrative symmetry of his description. The testimony of Herodotus does not exist in isolation. Over the subsequent 5 centuries, a succession of independent, highly educated scholars from the Hellenistic and Roman worlds traveled to Egypt and corroborated his findings. These authors were not merely copying Herodotus. They were conducting their own site surveys, arriving at distinct conclusions that confirmed the sprawling subterranean network. Writing in the 1st century BCE, the Greek geographer Strabo analyzed the complex in Book 17 of his Geography. Strabo approached the site as a specialist in physical geography and urban planning, confirming the monumental scale of the labyrinth near the pyramids. He confirmed the monumental scale of the labyrinth, noting its close structural proximity to the pyramids and describing the subterranean routing with engineering-like precision. Strabo observed that the roofs of the underground chambers consisted of single, monolithic, stone slabs of immense mass, spanning vast widths without the aid of center supports. He explicitly remarked on the deliberate, unnavigable complexity of the underground corridors, stating that they were designed to ensure that no foreign intruder could navigate the subterranean levels without an official guide. Shortly thereafter, the historian Diodorus Siculus, in his Bibliotheca Historica, evaluated the political history of the underground complex. Diodorus attributed its construction to a historic confederation of 12 ruling kings who sought to create a unified monument that would serve as a collective sepulchre and an eternal testament to their joint administration. His account emphasizes the physical durability of the underground works, noting that the scale of the masonry was specifically calculated to withstand the degradation of both human conflict and natural weathering over millennia. By the 1st century CE, the Roman natural philosopher Pliny the Elder provided an invaluable description of the sensory and physical realities of these underground spaces within his Natural History, Book 36. Pliny focused on the acoustic properties of the stone chambers and the profound psychological impact of their design on the visitor. He recorded that the subterranean passages were maintained in absolute, total darkness, and that the masonry was engineered to produce a thunderous, low-frequency resonance whenever a structural portal was operated. Pliny wrote, "The passages are mostly in darkness, and when anyone opens a door, a sound like a terrible clap of thunder echoes within. Moreover, one passes through these halls in deep silence, for the architecture is designed to suppress the human voice while amplifying the stones." He recorded that the subterranean passages were maintained in absolute, total darkness, and that the masonry was engineered to produce a thunderous, low-frequency resonance whenever a structural portal was operated. He explicitly records that the ancient Egyptians, possessing advanced astronomical knowledge and anticipating a global environmental cataclysm or deluge, carved out deep, winding fissures and subterranean vaults which he terms syringes or fistulae directly into the natural bedrock. They did this for a singular, deliberate purpose, to ensure that the core intellectual achievements, religious records, and scientific observations of their civilization would survive an existential catastrophe. This classical chorus spanning nearly 1,000 years and featuring 5 of antiquity's most respected analytical minds establishes an empirical baseline. It is historiographically impossible to dismiss their collective testimony as a shared delusion or a literary trope. They all point toward a physical reality, a massive, highly sophisticated, multi-level infrastructure cut directly into the limestone bedrock of Egypt. With the collapse of the Roman administration in Egypt and the subsequent expansion of the Islamic Caliphate in the 7th century CE, the intellectual framework for evaluating the Giza Plateau underwent a fundamental shift. The classical Western traditions of autopsia and systemic geographic surveying were replaced by a highly rigorous, alternative academic tradition, medieval Islamic historiography, as the shifting sands of the Libyan desert began to bury the surface entrances to the labyrinth, described by the Greeks and Romans, Arab geographers, engineers, and historians approached the Giza Plateau with a combination of structural curiosity and empirical documentation. They did not view the pyramids as dead monuments, but as active architectural riddles containing deep interior voids and subterranean configurations, rather than relying on classical European texts which were largely unavailable to them. These medieval scholars gathered direct field observations, interviewed local engineering guilds. They recorded the results of the early, state-sanctioned exploration projects conducted by the Abbasid and Fatimid authorities. The intellectual apparatus of the Islamic Golden Age was intensely empirical. The intellectual apparatus of the Islamic Golden Age was intensely empirical. Scholars working within the tradition of Ilm al-Jagraphia, the science of geography, were tasked with creating precise itineraries, mapping resources, and recording the physical remnants of pre-Islamic civilizations, which they termed al-Atmar. This programmatic approach ensured that their documentations were integrated into broader economic and structural inventories of the state. Among the most critical voices of this era is Abu al-Hasan Ali al-Masudi, a 10th century historian often referred to as the Herodotus of the Arabs. In his monumental work, The Meadows of Gold and Mines of Gems, al-Masudi compiled an extensive repository of the structural realities of Giza. Al-Masudi documented that beneath the three primary pyramids lay an intricate matrix of subterranean vaults and galleries. He recorded that these underground systems were far more extensive than the small internal rooms visible within the pyramids themselves. According to his research, these deep chambers contained vast repositories of historical data, scientific instruments, and chemical formulas. These treasures were sealed by sophisticated mechanical doors and stone portcullises designed to prevent unauthorized entry. Crucially, al-Masudi detailed specific accounts of early exploration attempts where individuals descended into the deep fissures beneath the plateau. He described these spaces as being ventilated by an intricate system of hidden shafts that drew air from the surface. This allowed explorers to survive at depths exceeding 30 meters below the bedrock. His text emphasizes that these subterranean spaces were deliberately engineered to be independent of the monuments above. The mechanical descriptions provided by al-Masudi are particularly notable for their emphasis on counterweights and locking mechanisms. He describes stone doors that pivoted on hidden iron pins, balanced so precisely that a single human could move a multi-ton slab. However, these doors locked immutably if tampered with by brute force, indicating a tradition of structural security engineering. This aligns closely with the defensive architectural elements later discovered by modern excavators within the core of the standing monuments. In the 12th century, the polymath and physician Abidi al-Latif al-Baghdadi provided a strictly scientific clinical assessment of Giza's architecture. In his Kitab al-Ifada wal-Itibar, or the Book of Instruction and Admonition, al-Baghdadi approached archaeology with the precise eye of an anatomist, studying dimensions, material wear, and straw-like absolute fidelity. Al-Baghdadi conducted extensive personal inspections of the shafts and wells around the Giza Plateau, particularly focusing on the deep cuts in the bedrock that became visible as the surrounding sand shifted. He recorded massive, stone-lined shafts plunging vertically into the water table, distinct from standard burial practices of the Islamic or Roman periods. These shafts featured monumental masonry blocks fitted together with the same microscopic precision seen in the upper casing stones of the Great Pyramid. His writings provide an invaluable record of the physical state of the plateau before the extensive stone quarrying operations of the later Mamluk periods. Al-Baghdadi argued that the entire landscape was structurally hollowed out, describing deep, natural and artificial fissures that ran parallel to the causeways, suggesting a coordinated, underground urban plan designed to mirror the monumental alignment of the surface structures. As a physician, al-Baghdadi was uniquely attuned to environmental factors within confined spaces. He documented the barometric and thermal stability of the underground shafts, noting that despite the extreme heat of the Egyptian summer, the air temperature within the deep rock-cut vaults remained constant. This preservation of an artificial microclimate within the bedrock further supports the hypothesis that these spaces were engineered for long-term storage and preservation of organic and administrative materials. To fully comprehend this historiography, one must analyze the accounts of regional administrators, such as al-Makrizi, writing in his 15th century masterwork, the Kitat. Al-Makrizi documented the technical difficulties encountered by engineers under Caliph al-Mun, who attempted to force entry into the subterranean levels. These accounts detail the discovery of deep, unnavigable vertical drops and sudden pockets of toxic, stagnant air that hindered their progress. Massive granite blocks slipped down from hidden chambers to permanently seal the lower passages when disturbed, acting as ancient defensive mechanisms. The value of al-Makrizi's compilation lies in its reliance on official state records and engineering logs. These were not legends told by nomadic desert tribes. They were the operational field notes of mining experts and construction guilds who were tasked by the state to breach the stone monuments. Their repeated failures to safely penetrate past the immediate subsurface levels underscore the effectiveness of the defensive architectural strategies implemented by the ancient builders to protect the deeper city below. This body of medieval literature demonstrates that knowledge of the city below Gîza did not vanish during the Middle Ages. Instead, it was maintained through a sophisticated tradition of Islamic engineering and geographic scholarship. These writers confirmed that the subterranean plateau was a complex, multi-tiered environment filled with architectural anomalies that resisted simple classification as mere tomb shafts. The dawn of the 19th century marked the transition from textual documentation to systematic physical intervention on the Giza Plateau. With the arrival of Napoleon Bonaparte's scientific expedition in 1798 and the subsequent establishment of the Egyptian Antiquities Service, European antiquarians and early archaeologists shifted their focus from classical literature to active excavation, clearance, and structural mapping. However, these early Western explorers did not invent the field. Instead, they began to physically uncover the exact structural features that Herodotus, Pliny, and Al-Masudi had documented centuries prior. As they cleared thousands of tons of wind-blown sand from the base of the pyramids and the body of the Sphinx, They repeatedly breached deep subterranean chambers, rock-cut shafts, and water-filled fissures that confirmed a highly complex underground network. The geopolitical rivalry between Great Britain and France during this era served as a powerful catalyst for archaeological exploration. Funding from institutions and private collectors poured into Egypt, allowing antiquarians to hire large labor forces to clear sand on a scale never before attempted. This mass mobilization of labor quickly stripped away the superficial layers of desert accumulation, revealing that the limestone bedrock itself had been extensively carved, terraced, and tunneled by ancient engineers. Between 1816 and 18, British Consul General Henry Salt and the Italian mariner-turned-excavator Giovanni Battista Caviglia conducted daring subterranean explorations, operating with limited equipment and under hazardous conditions. Caviglia focused his efforts on clearing the choked interior passages of the Great Pyramid. Caviglia's most significant contribution was his clearance of the well shaft, the vertical passage plunging from the Grand Gallery into the bedrock. Upon clearing the debris, Caviglia proved that this shaft descended over 60 meters into a deep, rock-cut subterranean chamber. This chamber was located over 30 meters vertically below the pyramid's foundation line, deep within the earth. Furthermore, when Caviglia turned his attention to the Great Sphinx, he discovered a series of deep fissures and rock-cut cavities. Located directly beneath the monument's flanks and tail, Caviglia recorded entering a deep trench that descended into darkness. This suggested an architectural connection between the iconic monument and the underlying limestone strata. His excavations demonstrated that the bedrock of Gîza was not a solid, uniform mass, but a highly modified architectural canvas. The physical reality of Caviglia's work was grueling. He spent weeks in oxygen-depleted chambers, working by candle flame. His documentation emphasizes that many subterranean passages appeared to have been intentionally backfilled with tightly packed limestone rubble. This technique was designed to discourage looters and mask the entry points to deeper components of the underground network. In the late 1830s, the British military officer Colonel Howard Vyse and the civil engineer John Shea Purring undertook the most extensive, structurally rigorous survey of the Gîza monuments executed to that date. Their multi-volume publication, Operations Carried On at the Pyramids of Gîza in 1837, remains a foundational text for architectural archaeology. Vyse and Purring applied strict engineering protocols to the plateau. They measured angles, calculated volumes, and drafted highly detailed cross-sectional plans of every known internal and external structure. During their campaigns, they documented numerous deep shafts scattered across the limestone floor between the three main pyramids. Purring, utilizing his background in civil engineering, noted that many of these shafts were cut with perfect vertical alignment and featured recessed ledges designed to support massive stone cover slabs. They documented that several of these shafts descended directly to the level of the local water table, where they opened into vast, flooded halls that could not be explored with 19th century technology. Their work provided the first definitive graphic evidence that the Giza Plateau was honeycombed with deep-cut, large-scale, subterranean voids that matched the spatial descriptions of the classical authors. The collaboration between Weiss's military, logistics, and Perring's structural engineering introduced a level of mathematical precision that had been entirely absent from earlier antiquarian accounts. They mapped the precise elevations of the subterranean chamber floors relative to the base of the pyramids, demonstrating a coordinated structural relationship that suggested a singular master architectural plan. Following the work of Weiss and Perring, the Prussian expedition of 1840 to 1845, led by Egyptologist Carl Richard Lepsius, brought a new level of academic and philological precision to the mapping of Giza. Er is mele ook denkmele aus Ägypten und Ägypten-Provincropolis. Lepsius catalogued not only the standing monuments, but also the extensive network of subterranean tombs, rock-cut galleries, and structural shafts that peppered the landscape. His team noted the presence of ancient quarry marks and structural foundations that ran deep beneath the surface layers, demonstrating that the ancient builders had systematically altered the subterranean topography. This imperial mapping project established that the underground spaces of Giza were part of a vast, highly coordinated urban landscape. The Prussian methodology was distinguished by its integration of epigraphic analysis with structural mapping. Lepsius did not merely map the shafts. He translated the titles of the officials buried within. Many of these titles translated to variants of overseer of the secrets of the king or director of the underground works, providing linguistic confirmation of a highly specialized bureaucratic office. The 20th century brought an end to the era of amateur, antiquarian treasure hunting, replacing it with institutionalized, state-regulated academic archaeology. Universities and the Egyptian Department of Antiquities applied increasingly sophisticated scientific methodologies to the Giza Plateau to uncover its secrets. As excavators cleared the remaining accumulation of sand, they uncovered physical structures that provided definitive proof of multi-tiered, deep-cut engineering. The primary challenge for 20th century scholars was no longer verifying if underground spaces existed, but systematically mapping their immense scale and determining how they intersected with the water table beneath the Nile Valley. The 20th century approach was characterized by the introduction of stratigraphy and systematic conservation. Excavators were no longer content to merely locate chambers. They carefully recorded the depositional layers of silt, sand, and organic material within the shafts to reconstruct the history of their use, reuse, and ultimate abandonment, revealing that many of these subterranean structures had been maintained and accessed continuously across multiple pharaonic dynasties, revealing that many of these subterranean structures had been maintained and accessed continuously across multiple pharaonic dynasties. His findings were published in a definitive 10-volume academic series titled Excavations at Gîza. Hassan's work remains one of the most comprehensive and academically rigorous field surveys ever. Conducted on the site, Hassan's team cleared vast areas, uncovering an interconnected network of rock-cut channels and deep vertical shafts cut directly into the bedrock. Hassan's team cleared vast areas of the central plateau between the Kaffa Causeway and the Sphinx. During these campaigns, he uncovered an elaborate, interconnected network of rock-cut channels, subterranean drainage systems, and deep vertical shafts cut directly into the natural bedrock. He meticulously documented a massive subterranean drainage network that utilized deep rock-cut sans-pente reservoirs to manage water flow. His excavations proved that the ancient architects had treated the subterranean limestone as an active engineering environment, creating a complex infrastructure for managing liquid resources or ritual spaces beneath the visible monuments. The rigor of Hassan's field reports is illustrated by his careful charting of the bedrock's industrial modifications. He demonstrated that before any surface construction began, the builders executed a massive leveling operation that cut deep into the natural ridges of the plateau, incorporating subterranean structural elements directly into the foundational plan of the surface temples. His work effectively dismantled the notion that the underground spaces were afterthought expansions, showing instead that they were foundational to the site's design. The most dramatic 20th century confirmation of a deep, multi-tiered subterranean complex occurred during the excavations, overseen by Dr. Selim Hassan and later systematically cleared by Dr. Zahi Hawass in the late 1990s. The structure, known academically as the Tomb of Osiris or the Osiris Shaft, located directly beneath the causeway of the second pyramid Khafre. This monumental structure drops vertically through the solid bedrock via a series of 3 distinct, vertically stacked tiers, reaching a total depth of over 30 meters below the surface of the plateau. The first tier is a vertical shaft descending 9 meters into a rectangular holding chamber, acting as a structural anteroom. The second tier, a secondary shaft dropping an additional 13 meters into a vast, columned hall carved entirely out of the living limestone. This chamber features 7 distinct side recesses, or loculi, which contained massive basalt and granite sarcophagi. The third tier, a final shaft plunging another 9 meters into a deep, subterranean hall that is completely submerged beneath the modern water table. In the center of this flooded chamber sits a massive island of stone surrounded by a rock-cut trench and a granite sarcophagus. The Osiris shaft provided empirical proof of the exact type of engineering documented by Herodotus and Pliny. It demonstrated that the ancient Egyptians possessed the technical capacity to execute highly precise, large-scale structural engineering deep within the bedrock, working far below the natural water table to create multi-layered underground environments, the central islands. Geometric accuracy and the surrounding trench mimic descriptions of primordial creation, myths recorded in funerary texts. The engineering required to cut these deep chambers while managing the constant infiltration of groundwater indicates a mastery of hydraulic engineering that matches the sophisticated water management systems documented across other major urban centers of the ancient Near East. In the final decades of the 20th century, archaeology underwent a technological revolution with the introduction of non-invasive geophysical remote sensing. For the first time, researchers could look beneath the limestone bedrock without turning a single spade of earth, utilizing advanced electromagnetic and seismic technologies. Between 1977 and 1978, a team of scientists from SRI International, working with UC Berkeley and Ain Shams University, conducted groundbreaking surveys. They performed electromagnetic, sounding, and resistivity surveys across the Giza Plateau, particularly around the Great Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. The three surveys utilized ground-penetrating, radar, and electrical resistivity measurements to map the subsurface density of the limestone bedrock. The results were highly anomalous. The radar profiles revealed a series of significant rectilinear cavities and subsurface voids beneath the Sphinx. The data indicated that these voids were not natural geological caverns. Instead, they exhibited sharp, right-angled geometries characteristic of human architecture. These early geophysical anomalies provided the first modern scientific data, suggesting that descriptions of a city below Giza were anchored in reality. The significance of the three data lay in its repeatability. Multiple scans taken along parallel survey lines confirmed the consistency of the subsurface anomalies. This ruled out equipment error. The sharp transitions in density indicated a clear boundary between solid limestone and hollow air-filled spuss. As the world entered the 21st century, the application of non-invasive subsurface mapping technologies reached an unprecedented level of sophistication. Modern archaeology now relies on tools like seismic reflection tomography, electrical resistivity tomography, and cosmic ray Morn radiography to scan the Earth. These modern technologies have removed all ambiguity regarding the physical state of the Giza bedrock. They revealed that the plateau is not a uniform block of stone, but a highly complex, multi-tiered spatial matrix filled with structural voids. Deep vertical channels and massive, organized anomalies exist that cannot be explained by natural Eocene geological formations alone. Integrating these datasets into unified three-dimensional models has transformed our understanding. Geophysicists can now differentiate between bedrock, sand, and empty voids. This allows for a virtual exploration of the subterranean plateau that preserves the physical integrity of the site while exposing its underlying structural complexity. The most significant and relevant 21st century geophysical survey targeting the classical labyrinth descriptions was the Mataha expedition of 2008. This joint Belgian-Egyptian scientific project was conducted under the auspices of the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics. The Mataha expedition targeted the region of Hawara, located near the Fayum Oasis, which classical texts closely link to the Giza necropolis administrative complex. Classical texts closely link this area to the Giza necropolis administrative complex. The team deployed advanced ground-penetrating radar to scan the desert surface. The geophysical data confirmed the presence of a massive, underground, grid-like structure located several meters beneath the surface sand. The radar profiles mapped a series of parallel and intersecting mud brick and stone walls forming a vast network of hundreds of individual, rectilinear rooms and corridors stretching across an area of several thousand square meters. The thickness, alignment, and scale of these underground structures precisely matched the architectural descriptions of the upper levels of the labyrinth recorded by Herodotus and Strabo. The data proved that a subterranean complex of this scale was not a literary invention. but a physical reality waiting for systematic archaeological exposure. The publication of the Metaha results created a profound stir within the specialized community of geoarchaeologists. The presence of these vast underground grids confirms that ancient Egyptian state-level engineering was fully capable of executing massive, unified, subsurface building programs that matched the scale reported by classical eyewitnesses. In 2015, an international coalition of scientists from Egypt, France, Japan, and Canada launched the Scan Pyramids project, utilizing non-invasive cosmic ray worn radiography to map the internal structures of the Giza monuments. Worn tomography tracks subatomic particles called muons as they pass through solid matter, allowing scientists to detect differences in density within massive stone structures. In 2017, and subsequently confirmed with higher resolution data in 2023, the Scan Pyramids team announced the discovery of a massive, entirely unknown void located directly above the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid, termed the Big Void, as well as a smaller corridor near the north face. In 2017, and subsequently confirmed with higher resolution data in 2023, the Scan Pyramids team announced the discovery of a massive, entirely unknown void located directly above the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid, termed the Big Void, as well as a smaller corridor near the north face. It proved that even the most heavily studied monuments on Earth still contain massive, hidden spatial voids that have eluded traditional archaeological methods for centuries. The successful verification of these internal anomalies validates the predictive power of modern, non-invasive physics when applied to ancient architecture, bolstering confidence in the scans that map the even larger voids beneath the plateau floor. The concept of a city below Giza is not a modern myth or a New Age trope. It is a documented historical reality. From Herodotus's precise descriptions through the testimonies of Strabo, Pliny, and medieval geographers like Al-Masudi, the evidence is consistent. The Giza Plateau sits atop a profound, multimillennial subterranean infrastructure project representing one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. The international scientific community must prioritize a transparent, systematic, and fully integrated geoarchaeological exploration of the Giza bedrock. The true history of our civilization may not be written on the stones above the sand, but within the monumental city that lies beneath.